If you ask young Jewish kids what their favorite part about Shabbat at camp is, they'll tell you that it's the experience of the outdoors during services. I mean, it's also the free time and the fact that the counselors aren't looking so carefully and all those kinds of things. But when they sit at services, it's the outdoors, and it's amazing that we have that here. I have two vistas. Of course, I have the outdoors, and then we're able to look out at all of you, and it's just wonderful, really wonderful to see everyone back together again, sitting shoulder to shoulder and appreciating each other's presence. If I use a lot of camp references, it's because some of my most formative years were spent there, and I love Jewish camp. I went for so long. Now, the Jewish stuff was great. We had Shabbat, we have Jewish community, but I was in high school. So there was a lot of other, well, you know what I mean. But what I really loved about camp was that in my public high school, I was a bench-sitting midfielder in soccer. But at my Jewish camp, I was a starter. Every game. Regardless of my soccer skills, though, I have to say I do love watching. And Women's World Cup this past summer was great to watch. And watching got me thinking, the fans are incredible, like no other. They're so involved in the game, they paint their faces, they wear costumes, they have chants. It's really as close as you can get to being in the game, those fans are in the game. And no doubt it makes a difference, but when you really get right down to it, they are observers. Because the folks on the field actually working up a sweat and bumping into each other are the ones who really have control over the game, and they're the participants. Well, it's like that in life as well. We have observers, those who kind of sit in the stand, and we have participants, those who are actually in the game really playing. So I want to explore that dichotomy with you this afternoon. What does it mean to be an observer in life, and what does it mean to be a real participant? It's a continuum. I wouldn't say that it's a black or a white thing, but we move back and forth sometimes between being a real participant and being an observer, and sometimes we're just in the middle. When we're on the observer side, we're not fully disengaged, but like the fans in the stands, we're watching more from the sidelines rather than doing our best to control the outcome. Observers are more likely to miss the big picture, to avoid wrestling with complex issues, and to resist actively pursuing resolution to the challenges that life faces in front of them. However, when we're on the participant side, we do everything we can to call the shots. Life participants are more likely to set goals, to actively work to achieve them, and to do all we can to live the life we imagine for ourselves. And life participants also step back from time to time, and they analyze how they're performing in the game called life, and they take time to review their strategy and change what needs to be changed. And I'm going to bet that the Women's World Cup team for the United States is doing a lot of that right now. So you might be thinking, as I talk about this dichotomy between participant and observer, I'm a participant. I get up before 6 every morning, I work out, I take care of the kids, I put in long hours, I party hard, I play hard, I work hard. Yeah, that is a version of being a life participant, but you're running on a treadmill. And the question I might ask you, if that's your lifestyle, is that the treadmill you want to be on? I wonder, are you really living your best life? When life runs us, rather than us actually managing life, we may feel like participants because we're exhausted, but like those costumed fans in the sidelines at the World Cup, we're not really controlling the game. Our control is just as an illusion, as it seems like sometimes life is controlling us. But see, you made the effort to be here. You take this time seriously. Unlike hundreds of thousands of Jews who are perhaps not around or not even watching a stream on TV. So your presence, I believe, shows that you desire to give Judaism a meaningful place in your life. You're likely willing to engage in a dialogue about how Jewish values can influence the choices that you make in your life. But I want to be clear. I don't think there's a black or white Jewish answer to many, if not most, of life's questions. Different people can and will make different, authentically Jewish choices. But by wrestling with the ideas, by taking the time to dive in and explore the alternatives, we become so much more conscious participants in our life's journey. So let me add a modifier then to my phrase about being a life participant. Let's talk about being a Jewish life participant. So I want to tell you the story about an amazing Jewish life participant. Because this past year we lost her. She was an incredible human being, and many of you know her. Small of stature, but a giant because of the legacy that she left. Now, she impacted thousands of people, but she wasn't a politician, she wasn't a writer, she wasn't a presence in the media, she didn't run a large organization. She simply told her story again and again and again and again. And each time she told it, she seized the attention of the audience, left them spellbound, and taught an incredible lesson about determination, about grit, and about survival. And she had one prop, one that she held up before she started telling her story, and she put it down on the table as she talked. It was an apple. She held up that apple as she told her story. Her name, Sidonia Lacks. The apple would rest on the table as she spoke about her ordeal hiding from the Nazis in occupied Poland. It would sit there as she told of being forced into labor in the ghetto, of the death of her mother, of her father's flight from the ghetto to secure food for his starving daughter, a venture from which he never returned. And as we sat enthralled by her story of escape, she told us about how the train that was taking her to Auschwitz was bombed by the Allies, and she escaped in the forest, and that's why she's alive today. And you're hearing this, and you're wondering, what does that apple have to do with this story, Sidonia? And then, in a room full of Jewish and often non-Jewish school children, she picks up the apple and she holds it up. And she'd say, "My father escaped from the ghetto to get me an apple. That apple, for me, in my life is a symbol," she said, "of my parents' willingness to sacrifice for their children. He lost his life for an apple." And then she'd end. So my story is telling you how we should never take anything for granted, not even an apple. After arriving in LA, Sidonia married, she gave birth to children, she became a grandmother, and she continued to tell that story. And she joined the March of the Living, and she walked with high school students until her legs couldn't support her anymore. How was she able to rebuild her life, to love, to raise children, to become a vibrant human being? How did she find the capacity to revisit those terrifying memories time after time after time as she told the story? She was a full Jewish life participant. She transformed the pain of her past into a transformational message to the world. Now, few of us, apart from Shoah survivors, can even imagine what she endured and what she carried with her her entire life as her memories. And none of us, not one of us, would have faulted her if she suppressed those memories and stopped talking about it, as my own grandparents did. But she chose a particular path. She left a legacy that will endure for generations. And if you've ever spent time with her, and I know some of you have, you would know, and you know, that she's a person who's full of joy and she's warm and enduring. Whenever I saw her, there was a big smile and a hug from me, as if I hadn't seen her in years. The brilliant scholar of the human condition, known for her work on vulnerability and leadership. Her name is Brené Brown. It's 2 B's, Brené Brown. Says that when we live our lives authentically, we take accountability for our most difficult emotions and actions. She says, either you walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and you hustle for worthiness. That's the difference between observers and participants. A participant walks inside their story, doing everything possible to live a meaningful, impactful life. An observer, on the other hand, lets life happen. They show up from time to time, don't get me wrong. They even cheer loudly from the sidelines. But when it comes to making real choices and real decisions that truly matter, They're often absent. There's a powerful and ancient rabbinic maxim. You might have heard it before. It reflects ideas that I think a Jewish life participant needs to consider. Now, the words are 2,000 years old, which in itself is astounding, but they're as true now as they were when they were written. The sage named Ben Zoma says, Eza hu ashir. Who is truly wealthy? The one who's satisfied with what they have. Eza hu gibor. Who is truly strong? The one who conquers their impulses. Eza hu mechubad. Who is truly honorable? The one who honors others. In this pithy bit of wisdom, our rabbis suggest that success is not about wealth, power, and honor. It's what we do with our status and our accomplishments that's the true measure of a life's worth. You're holding prayer books in your hands. You're flipping through it. You see the writings, you see the prayers, you see the passages, you see the notes, the commentary. It's a repository of wisdom. Its goal here, you're holding onto it now because it's inviting you to assert some of the values that percolate through in the words in the book into our lives. We've just read a litany of failings. It's tough to read al chet shechatanu, for the sins we've committed. If you read the list and you don't see yourself in some of them, and you don't recognize the need to focus on, I should say, we don't recognize our own self-improvement, well, then we are all at risk of being more an observer than a participant. Those words should hit your heart like the same way you pound your fist, hard. Today of all days, reading the words, it should drive us on an intense journey of self-reflection, of self-awareness, and we should come back from that journey committed to being more than we've been in the past. Told you about Sidonia because I really do believe she's exemplary. She reflected on her own experiences and she asked herself, how can I use my life to contribute to the world? How can I transform my memories into something filled with meaning? Her actions were intentional, they were purposeful, and they were deeply meaningful, both to her and to the thousands, literally thousands, who were moved by her message. Remember, she could have done nothing. She could have suppressed her memories. She could have bottled them up inside of her. She could have cascaded from life event to life event without much intention and lived her days out as a very happy observer. Millions of people do just that. We read Unatana Tokef. We sang Unatana Tokef. They're deeply disturbing words. Who shall live? Who shall die? Who by fire? Who by water? Who shall be tranquil? Who shall be disturbed? If only our fate was written with these days. If only our world was that well ordered. If only a divine judge acted to make it all turn out right, if there were clear consequences to our actions. But you've lived long enough to know that that's not the way the world works, and often we feel powerless in the face of life's vicissitudes. Neither prayer nor virtue guarantees a particular outcome. So we may not be able to control all that happens, but we can take charge of the choices we make when things do. There's a powerful word that we heard in our Torah portion, uvacharta v'chaim, powerful phrase, choose life. The intent, choosing life, is not merely to keep one's head above water. It's to be driven by choices that reflect a deep engagement with Jewish wisdom and insights. Just last week, I had a conversation with a woman about my age. She lost her husband quite suddenly several months ago. I asked her how she was holding up. She said, I've had bad days and I've had bearable days, and sometimes I've even had good days. And then she went on, but I am determined to live my life by being the mother my kids need, by remaining involved in the community, and I find much comfort in being a part of Jewish living. I am not turning away in anger. And with tears in both of our eyes, she hugged me. We rabbis have a lot of 5-minute conversations that go that deep, that quickly. She is also a Jewish life participant. In the face of suffering, of loss, of illness, we can make decisions that reflect our values and goals. We don't have to do it alone. We have families, we have clergy, we have therapists, we have doctors. All the resources are at our disposal that can support us and guide us as we navigate our way through complex life decisions. But to do nothing or very little is to risk being an observer in our own lives. Now, if you are fortunate, you may not have yet faced loss or illness or any number of life's traumatic challenges. But forgive me for being a prophet of doom here. You will. It's the way life goes. None of us are immune. But the time to think about what we're going to do in a crisis is not in the middle of the crisis. It's now. It's while we can think straight and contemplate our goals and values and use them to prepare as best we can for what lies ahead. It's time to discuss our thoughts with those we love, so that when situations arrive, you'll know that you did your best to be a true life participant. Will life happen to you, or will you exercise every capacity you have to make the choices that reflect your deepest values, the vision you have of who you are and who you want to be, and of course, the legacy you leave in the lives of those whose lives intersect with your own? You've heard this often, but it bears repeating. I filled in at a congregation called Tikva for our colleague who's ill this morning, and it's their custom to wear white. And you look out and you see a congregation, everybody's white and dressed in white. And that's one of the themes. That's why we dress in white, because Yom Kippur conveys a sense of mortality. We're shrouded in white when we're placed in our caskets. We confess our sins. We don't eat. These are all things associated with death. And at the end of today, we say, Adonai hu Elohim, and then we cite the Shema. Those are last words, also evocative of what we say as we face death. Our tradition acknowledges that we are not fully in charge of our lives, but we can make choices every day that will ultimately influence our fate. Perhaps not to give us a longer life, a life that is free of suffering, perhaps not even in a way that will either result in fabulous wealth or abject poverty. But if we take charge of how we live our lives to the fullest extent possible, if we live with introspection, with righteousness, if we live in a way that's committed to repairing broken relationships, the quality of our lives will be dramatically different. We will live inside our own story, and we will truly be Jewish life participants. Amen.